At 4ZZZ, we acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we broadcast. We pay our respects to the elders past, present and emerging of the Turrbal and Jagera people. We acknowledge that their sovereignty over this land was never ceded.
And we stand in solidarity with them.
You're listening to Transmission on 4ZZZ, amplifying the trans and gender non-conforming voices of Brisbane and beyond.
Hello, you're listening to Transmission on 4ZZZ. My name is Ez, I use he, him pronouns, and yeah, Transmission's all about amplifying the voices of the trans community here in Meanjin and beyond. And today, we've got a special episode because I've got a beautiful friend, Marissa. How you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Returning guest. Last time we talked about... What did we talk about last time?
We talked about neurodiversity one time.
That's right.
But we've also had another one.
Yes, we have.
I can't remember.
And this one is about...
We're talking about power today.
Power.
Power is our special subject for the morning.
Yeah, so we're going to have an interesting conversation about power, how that relates to transness and the trans community, and what power really is and what we can do with it. So
yeah, ways to be creative with it. I'm all about the creative responses. So
creative power. Yeah. All right. Well, before we get straight into that, I'll just mention the week in community events and news. So coming up, I got a message from the one and only Sellma Soul. She says, "I'm back, baby, with Bad Times Trivia, and I know you freaks are excited for me to tell it at you. The team at Easyimes Brewing Co. and myself are excited to invite you and your smartest and or preferably dumbest friends to have a go at the most unfair trivia night this coming and every other coming Wednesday, unless natural disaster and or state of origin game should be inflicted upon us. Registration is 6:30 p.m. for a 7 p.m. start. Prizes are still to be arranged and the booking info is to come. But yeah, that's Sellma Soul. Easyimes Brewing presents Bad Times Trivia. So yeah, definitely keep your eyes out for that. And in news, not really anything too much to report other than Kai and I will be heading to Melbourne, down to Naarm, tomorrow, and we'll be down there for 2 weeks. So you've got two special guest hosts for the next 2 weeks coming up. While Kai and I are down in Melbourne, we're going to be going to a lot of really cool queer and trans-orientated businesses, venues, events and spaces, and we're going to do what we can to collect all the good stuff and go, you know what, stuff you Melbourne, we're going to take it to Brisbane. So we're going to talk about what's cool down there and what we can do up here and how we can make our community better and stronger when we come back. So yeah, you'll have 2 weeks. You've got Sev, host of After Dark, as well as Jay, who you may know from No Idea if you listen on Wednesdays to 4ZZZ. Jay is going to be hanging out in the studio. I'm not sure what Jay's actually going to be talking about, but it'll be good. You'll know Jay from our Alexander Ball segments and House of Alexander ballroom stuff. So yeah, amplifying the voices of the trans and gender non-conforming community of Meanjin, Brisbane and beyond.
Transmission on 4ZZZ brings you the latest in trans community news, music and events.
Every Tuesday from 9 a.m. till 10 a.m.
Join our team of hosts for an hour of celebrating the unique perspectives of the trans community.
Transmission, Tuesday mornings from 9 a.m. till 10 a.m. on 4ZZZ. You're listening to Transmission on 4ZZZ. My name is Ez, he, him.
I'm Marissa. My pronouns are they, them.
And yeah, we're going to be chatting about power.
Power.
Power! So, what is power?
Okay. Power is one of my favorite subjects. So, at its most basic, there are so many definitions, but it's really just, in its simplest, it's the ability to influence or to impact your environment. So, actually, we're using power all the time. Whether we know it or not, we're kind of wired to use it.
Human power, wielding power, all the time.
Yeah, all the time. So I think we tend to think about it as something that we have or we don't have. We think of it as a possession, or we tend to think of it in quite a binary way, they have the power and I don't have the power, or vice versa.
Right.
But actually, it's very, very fluid, and we're all simultaneously in a position of power and disempowerment at the same time, always, pretty much.
An example of that would be that you're a guest on this show, and the power would be in my control because I'm at the panel pushing the buttons.
Yeah, definitely. So you have some And I would say I have some because I could say some pretty embarrassing things about you.
You really could.
As a guest,
You could. It's fine.
Yeah. So it's like multiple directions all the time. And, maybe I have more power as a guest than someone else because we're friends and someone else might not be friends with you, or
yeah, right.
because I know other people at 4ZZZ, maybe I have some more. So I have like the power of proximity. Yeah.
And you teach power, right? Or you sort of teach a bit of these dynamics?
Yeah, so I tutor in social work, critical social work, and so we talk about power a lot with the social work students. It's really important because pretty much as soon as you're a social worker, you have a lot of power over your clients. So it's really important to be aware of how you're using it, and if you really don't think you're using power, actually that can get you into some traps. Like some of the worst practices can come from the fact that you don't have an awareness about the power that you're holding.
And the responsibility that comes with.
Yeah, absolutely.
At the risk of I'm sure people know that I love Spider-Man, but with great power comes great responsibility, right?
Yeah.
And that's that whole thing of, especially if you're in a position where you have a sense of authority, so authority and power. So I heavily associate power with politicians and government. Mm-hmm. And I guess that really relates to the powerless feeling that trans community members have about the government, and the lack of help and support can feel like an oppression or just you're ignoring us, and how we go about taking that power back. So how does that relate? How do we...
Well, we have structural oppression is a huge issue, and it can make you feel very powerless, and actually a lot of the time it works by making you feel powerless. Even if you're not entirely powerless in certain situations, oppression can really mess with you and your ability to act upon the world.
Yeah, think too, right?
Yeah.
Like your ability to think and process through things.
Absolutely. So, we like to teach that even if you're extremely powerless in a situation, you always have a bit, even if it's a very humble little bit. One of the classic examples is some of our most helpless kind of states of being when we're little babies, completely dependent on someone else for survival, but you can cry. You can exercise power by crying, and a lot of people respond very quickly to babies crying,
So, crying babies, it's a power move?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's a way of getting your needs met. It's a way of influencing your environment, so you get some food or some cuddles or something.
And it's also and it's as well as it being a self-expression or an emotive experience as well, it's also coupled with power. Yeah. So what do you find so fascinating about power and power dynamics?
Well, I have a highly analytical brain, so I love pulling apart any social or political situation. But I really love the idea that power is really fluid and it's flowing through almost everything that we say and do and the way we interact with the world, and it's also up for grabs at any moment. And there's so many creative ways you can subvert it. One of the examples I like to think about is, there's this lotto advert where this guy is writing a test, a school student is writing a test, and he finishes late and the teacher's like, nah, I'm not letting you submit your test at the front of the room. And the kid goes, do you know who I am? In a kind of angry way. And the teacher's like, no, I literally don't care who you are. I don't know who you are and I don't care. And the kid's like, oh, great. And he just opens a pile of tests and slips his test into the pile of other tests. So,
just randomly inside. Yeah.
Yeah, so it just gets lost in a pile of tests. So in that example, it's like, oh, this kid used the power of being anonymous to get his test in.
Yeah, right.
So you can subvert it, you can grab it, you can work with it, you can be groovy about it.
Trans community members do this a lot, Yeah. We're always trying to subvert things, particularly within the community. I was talking to someone, Bet. That's who I was talking to. Lovely person who I met at Quiver, also excellent event if you want to check that out. And we were talking about how trans masks have this ability to, as they transition, they become more masculine, might grow more facial hair, whatever, their voices change. Maybe there's surgery, maybe there's not, doesn't matter. But that you're like, really against feminine attire. And then as you medically transition or things change, you start going, now that I pass as a cis man or whatever in certain scenarios, which is a sense of power that and privilege that you move into, we want to subvert that because I kind of hate that. I kind of resent that. And I lived a life of not that privilege. And I don't really like... And my way of challenging that binary, that status, that privilege, is to subvert it. So I paint my nails really loud, or and a lot of trans masks will wear dresses or skirts, or just go one way and then all the way back the other way again, and then just whatever, it doesn't even matter, and just subvert and twist and bend all of this power dynamic and this perception, which is just really, it's so cool. It's so cool that we can grab this gender, and because gender, you know, as we've known, men equals power, women equals less than that power. So we've grabbed both of these binary genders and gone, nah. Totally. We're gonna mess with this, and we're gonna mess with you in that process, and we take power back in that process.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's really cool. It's really cool what we can do.
My name is Georgie Stone, and you're listening to Transmission on 4ZZZ.
You're listening to Transmission on 4ZZZ. My name is Ez, he, him.
And I'm Marissa, they, them.
And we're chatting about power, what power is and does and is everywhere, and how we can creatively use it, and how we can seize it for our own, but also how we can subvert it and change things. And that's in relation not just to the trans community, but for everyone. Everyone can take something from this. Yeah. So, yeah, power.
Power. We're all living in power dynamics all the time. They're inescapable, I would say.
Yeah, and just during like some of the music there, Marissa and I were chatting about how oppression can create, sometimes, not always, but oppression creates the illusion of powerlessness.
Yeah.
But in actual fact, we all have power to a certain extent, and how we can manipulate that to our advantage and seize more power.
Yeah, definitely. So I have like a little anecdote about identity, how I was going to do a singing performance. I was very scared about it. I hadn't done it before. And I wasn't thinking of myself as like a real or legitimate performer. So I got up there and the band started playing too fast. And I was like, oh God, I've just got to get through this. Like, that's what I thought in the moment. I've just got to get through this. And yeah, I got through this performance with the band playing too fast. And I think back on it and how I just felt so powerless in that moment. But it was literally my performance. Like, I could have so easily been like, I could have been like, hey guys, can we just like slow it down a bit? Like, I could have given them the pace and then restarted it or something. But because I had constructed myself as powerless going into it, I didn't feel like I had the power to do that, and I didn't.
Yeah, and that kind of stems from, you know, when we're born, assigned female at birth and perceived as women, or little girls or whatever, when we're growing up, we're told that there's a certain cap of power that you have as a woman, right? And then for trans masks, particularly in my experience, I've come from a feminist background, you know, really radical mom, and, you know, fighting for our equality and our power back and that. And as I started to transition and moved into passing privilege, which is the ability to pass as a cis man, although people would not know that I'm trans unless I told them. So that's a privilege, that's a power. And so as I moved into that space, I realized the privilege that I came into. And so I wanted to subvert that. However, it's a bit different the other way around. So for a lot of trans femmes who were born perceived male at birth, they're raised with a different idea of how much power you can seize from the world and what's yours, which is usually the opposite for what women have. And so when they transition, for when those trans femmes transition, they come into misogyny. They come into the patriarchy. And they don't realize that until they're transitioning and they go into it and they fall into it and they go, oh, crap. This is the difference. We see the literal gap in lived experience through interaction and so on and so on and so on. And all of this is entrenched in misogyny and
what an
power
incredible
dynamics.
Perspective to have.
It is. Trans people have a lens that is just, it's mind-boggling. And that's why when we say gender is meaningless, we mean it. It really is meaningless. When you get to a point where you see everything, the veil has been lifted, it really is just this terrible, terrible illusion of power. And this illusion that oppression creates, that you are powerless but you're not. And so we subvert
I would kind
stuff.
of say it's like both. It's like you've got this structural element to it, this societal element, and there are real barriers to people. Like, those things aren't illusions, but often we can get into these ways of thinking. They're often self-protective ways of thinking, but like, oh no, I can't try that because that's going to go bad because I'm going to face transphobia there, or that space isn't for me, I can't do that. And that's one of the ways that oppression can really reinforce itself, by giving you this worldview that you can't even do anything. Like, you can't even try, you can't even go places. So we can internalize those power structures, and we can really start to take them for granted in conscious and unconscious ways. And that's, it's one of the ways that oppression reinforces itself.
And I guess, like, we were talking about allies as well. And, like, you know, it's tricky when you're, like, trying to be a good ally. And, you know, we're like, oh, a good ally will call out bad pronouns and will, you know, the wrong pronouns and, you know, all that sort of stuff. But that's so dependent on circumstance and the power that's involved in the situation as well. You know, if you have a boss that uses the wrong pronouns for a coworker, not necessarily yourself, and you're afraid of your position in relation to that boss and your coworker, you might be too afraid to correct those pronouns. You might also not have the damn energy to advocate for someone else, you know. So, and that's absolutely no fault of your own. You know?
Yeah. So something I see happen a lot with my students, like people learning how to be social workers, is we get a lot of things that we call critical incidents where some like racism or transphobia or something has happened in their organization or with a client, and they've just like let the moment pass them by, and then they've gone, oh my God, I'm like a terrible activist. I'm a terrible ally. I've just failed at being a good activist. So there's this binary thinking around good activist, bad activist, like successful activist, failed activist.
The black and white.
Yeah. And then they feel more powerless because they've just gone, I've failed, you know. But actually, if you think about it, what have they done? So if you've let a moment pass you by, you've probably protected yourself from some potential negative consequences of speaking up. And that's an exercise of power, even though you didn't do anything. It can feel very passive, but you did something. You know, there's a reason that you didn't speak up. You've also potentially preserved your relationships with those people so you can keep working on them. You know, like it's not just like one and done because you let the moment pass. It can be very useful to have a good relationship with someone to, you know, go talk to them, work with them later.
It's good too because you can actually recognize the incident or the moment and then take it with you and go, now how can I bring this up in a way that I can lead them to a place of like new awareness or new understanding? I like to do a lot of taking my time when I hear things and then coming back to people.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, like one of the questions, like it might be a little bit of a challenging question for some people, but do you have to talk to someone about their transphobia to make them less transphobic? I would argue that there's a lot of different ways to like help someone become less transphobic. And one of them might be to relate to them on a different level or, you know, with other things to really humanize yourself to them and, you know, potentially like be there for them if they're a friend or a colleague in other ways. And maybe you literally never have to talk about transphobia, but their transphobia changes because of your presence with them. You know, so it's just to say that there are like so many options. There's so many ways to make change with people in our relationships.
And using your power to do that.
Yeah, using the power of friendship.
The power of friendship.
Yeah, of course, never do anything that makes you feel unsafe or, you know, and some situations they really do warrant a call out. But it's just not the only way, I would say. I think you can be really creative with it.
Yeah, we were just talking about like creatively solving things with power and recognizing how we can take that back.
How many genders are there?
I don't know. I just got here.
You're listening to Transmission on 4ZZZ. My name is Ez, he, him.
And I'm Marissa, they, them.
We were chatting about power and what we can do with it and what you think you couldn't have done with it, but it's actually there and all this stuff. We're learning lots of things about power.
Yeah, we've gotten a bit philosophical so far. But we were saying let's maybe get a bit more practical about it.
Yeah, let's get practical. Let's get practical. Sorry. Yeah, let's do it.
So I brought this amazing book in. It's called Powerrr, A User's Guide.
Wielding.
Julie Diamond.
Wow. I always think of a lightsaber when I think of power.
Yes. Use the power. Use the force for
use
good.
the force. Yeah, like the whole thing.
Exactly. So I really love this book because, you know, she sees power as being in things like institutions, in hierarchies, in forms of status, in seniority and things like that. But like me, she doesn't see those things as fixed because she also sees power playing out in interactions with other people all the time.
What's the
and
author?
It's up for grabs. Julie Diamond.
Julie Diamond. All right.
Yeah. So she's got this like great little list of like things that you can be self-aware about, kind of like common misuses of power or mistakes with power. And we thought
Power
we could go
mishaps.
through them. Yeah, power mishaps. Yeah, and I've fallen into a lot of these before. It's, some of them are very relatable to me. So, yeah,
I'm sure as you
let
list
us
them,
know what you think.
I'm sure as you list them, people go, "Oh, that's me." Yeah, I did that.
Totally. So here's one that she says: using power before earning it. She says, when you think authority alone makes you the leader, you lose legitimacy. You got to really earn your power instead of just like embarking on a new initiative before anyone's really like earned respect from you and things like that. And you just kind of like go ahead, and that can really mess with things.
And it's like, we don't know who you are. Why are you leader, self-appointed?
Yeah, exactly. And you haven't cultivated your relationships, communicated ideas with people, things like that. You've just gone, I'm in the position of authority. Let's go.
Yeah.
So that's one.
I know a few of them.
Yeah. This one's really relatable to me, sidestepping authority. So she says, determined not to misuse power, you avoid taking a stand and making tough calls.
So you have power, but you're actionless.
Yeah, like maybe you're really scared of being seen as authoritarian, or you see power as being really bad, so you don't really like step into it even though you're in a position of authority.
Yeah,
and
right.
That can be a bit problematic because people can be expecting you to make those decisions, and then you're like trying to sidestep them
and try to avoid
problems.
making a decision.
Yeah.
As well.
So I was saying before to you in the break, like when I'm facilitating, my urge is always to be like, I don't want to be authoritarian, so I'm just going to like let everyone talk and I'm not going to like jump in. I'm going to really empower them. Like that's always what I think. But power dynamics play themselves out in the room all the time, and sometimes you have to intervene in them, or sometimes you have to moderate a room to make sure that things are fair and everybody gets a voice and things like that. So actually just trying to like step out of the power can be a problem. It can actually let existing power dynamics keep playing themselves out as they are.
Right. So don't just sit there with it.
Yeah. Step in, embrace it. What else does she say? She says using too much ammo is a common mistake. So she says if you identify as the weaker party, you start every encounter from a perceived one-down position. If you're kind of convinced that you won't be able to get your point across, you start off in an escalated way.
Right, so you're on the defensive.
Yeah, you're on the defensive immediately.
You're ready. You're ready to attack and strike back.
Yeah, and sometimes you like don't realize that you're actually the one that's maybe using the power in a unconscious way in the first place.
And being motivated by like your prejudices as well. Like, in the past these things have happened to me, so I need to be on the defense immediately.
Yeah, totally.
And I need to defend my power immediately.
This can be really subconscious, and this can come from real awful experiences. You can like subconsciously go, oh God, this is always going to happen to me, so I just really need to be heard. And then you can, inadvertently alienate people with that. So, yeah, something I see a lot.
I can feel the relation that people are having out there.
Yeah.
Like I feel like that's relatable for a lot of people.
Yeah. The next one is using power to boost your low self-worth. So you use your rank like a drug. We were saying just before, you can get high on power. It's really easy to do that.
It's like, yes, look what I can do.
It's very seductive.
Yeah.
It's great to feel important. It's great to feel needed and respected and
Because it corrupts. It can corrupt, right? Like,
yeah.
Especially if you're getting high off of it, the dopamine, the reward, you eventually.
Yeah, and often it can be covering up insecurity.
Who would have thought that?
I'm gonna go do power seeking things because I'm actually feeling really bad about myself.
I'm gonna do power seeking things because I feel powerless.
Yeah.
Even though you actually are in power.
The paradox.
Yeah.
The paradox. I love this stuff.
Power
Getting
paradox.
me excited with paradoxes. Yeah. So the next one she says is buying your own pitch. And this one, I think this is one of the key ways that power can really corrupt people, is when you create a culture where your ideas aren't challenged. So you surround yourself with like yes people. None of them want to say to you, oh, I don't think that idea is great. Can we do something else?
Oh, like when you're watching like a singing show where, it's sort of like cattle call and a whole bunch of like singers rock up and they're kind of like Aussie Idol, didn't want to have to mention it, or The Voice or something. And, they've been told their whole lives by their family that they're really good singers, but then they go to this audition, they humiliate themselves in front of the whole country because they've been told this whole time that they could sing, even though they probably need a lot more lessons.
Yeah. Like, okay, tell your friend when they've got a piece of food on their face.
Yeah. Oh, please do that. Please do
It's
that.
really uncomfortable, but you gotta do it.
Yeah, you gotta do it.
Yes. Second last one, satisfying your self-interest. So, a high-ranking role makes it easy to satisfy personal needs. And there's an example here. If you're a professor, you can compel your graduate students to take over undesirable tasks. Or if you're a boss, you can get subordinates to run errands for you. So it's misusing power.
Yeah, it's like you're wielding it, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally. Like, people can't say no to you because you're, like, their boss or their leader in some way.
And people use that a lot,
Or maybe you just
I
have
feel.
the social capital in a community. Like, it doesn't even have to be a formal position of hierarchy. It can be an informal position. You can get people to do things for you that they don't really want to do.
Dicey. That transcends into, like, many areas. Whether that comes from professional spaces, family dynamics, all sorts of things.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that abuse of power.
Yeah, family dynamics are full of power dynamics. You know?
Oh, so many, so many.
Yeah, so
including when you have pets as well.
In, like, institutions.
You
and
can
other
see
things.
the flow through of, you have parents, maybe you have grandparents, and they also have a certain area of power depending on the situation.
Yeah.
Children, siblings in order from the youngest to the eldest, and then you have pets as well. Pets fall into the dynamic.
And then
It's a
how
whole
do
thing.
like each of the siblings regain their own power?
Yeah, or manipulate power from each other. Oh, it's a whole thing.
It's really it's so fascinating.
Maybe we'll talk about families and power dynamics.
Like,
at some point.
are you a only child or an oldest child?
I'm an only child.
Okay.
But I have a half brother and half sister that are about the same age, a bit younger than my parents actually. Or well, a bit younger than my mum. My dad's much older. I was sort of raised half as an only child and then a little bit with like my nieces who are the same age as me. And I was the youngest out of the two of them. So I was and I was with them a bit.
You're kind of
so.
a bit only, a bit youngest.
A bit youngest, a bit
It's a good
only. Yeah, it's a
combo.
weird fusion.
Yeah, totally.
I'm a bit of a loose cannon.
I personally feel like sibling order tells you a lot about a person.
It does. It really does.
And how they use power. I've got the oldest child thing of like, I really want to try and control my circumstances. I want to try and be really good. I want to do well at stuff. I'm a bit perfectionistic sometimes.
Overachiever.
Yeah. Highly responsible, but
Yep.
sometimes too responsible for other people's stuff.
Yep, you need to relax. Gosh, the
Yeah,
whole like
totally.
calm down a bit, relax.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, and the last one, simply overdoing it. So Julie says, like Narcissus, it's easy to become mesmerized by our reflections when we occupy high-ranking roles. The lecturing professor falls in love with the sound of her own voice and fails to see she's lost interest from the class. The boss micromanages and refuses to delegate, believing himself smarter than everyone else.
So then you can have this inflated sense of self-confidence, and I feel like everyone can relate. There's someone there or there's something that you can relate to, or that you've seen unfold, whether that's at home or at work or wherever. Yeah, that's totally relatable.
And working in community development, it's like I've met all of these archetypes, and I've fallen into them too.
Yeah, and it's all circumstantial. It can be
is.
all like based on circumstance. Sometimes you're just like, okay, I'm new to this situation. I don't know everyone here, so I'm going to be more reserved than I normally would because I'm learning the power dynamics and how things unfold. So yeah,
and
it's all
I guess
interesting.
I just think there's such a taboo around talking about power, and it gets a really bad rap. And I do really wish we were just less ashamed about it and saw it as just a really natural part of being in a community, being human, being with other people. Like, it's part of us. And just talking about it and having awareness about it is such a really good thing.
And power can always change.
Yeah,
Always
and it's
change.
not
It's always
necessarily
changing.
bad. It's really useful. It's how we change the world. Like, how are we gonna change the world if we totally see ourselves as powerless, inevitably all the time?
My beautiful trans fam, it's come to the end of transmission. Thank you so much, Marissa, coming in and talking about power.
Thanks so much for letting me nerd out.
Absolutely. Anytime. You'll be back for sure. Thanks for listening. We'll see you all next week. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for listening to Transmission. See you next Tuesday, 9 to 10 a.m. on 4ZZZ.